The Messerschmitt Bf 109 was a sign in itself of whoever piloted it. A black tulip on the nose and a heart pierced by an arrow. On board was none other than Erich Hartmann, the terror of the skies. Known as the Black Devil, he became a legend of Nazi aviation during World War II. His brilliant piloting skills led him to shoot down more than 350 enemy planes, earning the respect even of his adversaries, who both feared and admired him in equal measure. The young pilot's progress was truly astonishing. At 15, he was already giving glider flight instruction. When World War II broke out, Hartmann didn't hesitate to join the Third Reich's aerial effort. He put his unparalleled skill in service to Nazi Germany without question. This led him into missions that were almost suicidal, which we'll discuss further later on. Hartmann became a symbol of cunning, determination, and courage, whose story continues to inspire generations of aviators worldwide. Join us in this new installment to learn in detail about Erich Hartmann's exceptional career, the Black Devil. Fasten your seatbelt for an exciting historical journey. Let's begin. During World War II, aerial strategy reached its peak of military intensity, notably during the Battle of Britain in the summer of 1940. This confrontation between the Royal Air Force and the German Luftwaffe was crucial for the course of the war in Western Europe. The Luftwaffe, led by Adolf Hitler, aimed to control the skies over the English Channel as a prelude to a possible land invasion of Britain. In contrast, the British forces, under Hugh Dowding's leadership, steadfastly resisted German attacks with innovative tactics and an efficient network of radar and communications. Among the many pilots involved in this conflict, Erich "Booby" Hartmann stands out, considered the best in history. This young pilot fought on the Eastern Front throughout the war, achieving an impressive record of enemy aircraft kills. From an early age, Erich Hartmann immersed himself in the world of aviation under the guidance of his mother, one of Germany's first female pilots. The family even owned their own glider, though they sold it due to economic difficulties in the 1930s. With Hitler coming to power in 1933, interest in flying grew, prompting his parents to establish an aviation school. The young pilot's progress was nothing short of astonishing. At 15, he was already a glider instructor. When World War II erupted with the invasion of Poland in 1939, Hartmann did not hesitate to join the aerial effort of the Third Reich. His first victory for the regime came a month after enlisting, when he shot down a Soviet Il-2 Sturmovik ground attack aircraft. Stationed on the Eastern Front at just 20 years old, he gained a reputation among his adversaries for his skill and aggressiveness in combat. Throughout the conflict, he was only forced to crash his plane on 14 occasions due to mechanical failures or damage caused by enemy aircraft. While this may seem like a considerable number, in the context of aerial warfare, it is a testament to the courage and skill of the young aviator to survive and continue fighting under extremely adverse conditions. During the Battle of Kursk in the Soviet Union in July 1943, Hartmann left an indelible mark on aviation history by shooting down 7 aircraft in a single day, an extraordinary achievement that further highlighted him as one of the best fighter pilots. That year concluded with a total of 159 victories. An impressive record.
Der vom Führer anlässlich seines 301. Flugzeugabschusses mit dem Brillanten zum Ritterkreuz des Eisernen Kreuzes ausgezeichnete Staffelkapitän Oberleutnant Erich Hartmann trifft nach seinem 300. Luftsieg auf den Feldflughafen ein. General der Flieger Seidemann gratuliert dem erst 22-jährigen Brillanten.
Hartmann's plane, the Messerschmitt Bf 109, was his loyal companion in the air, recognizable by its distinctive markings that instilled fear in Soviet pilots. The aircraft was an imposing figure in the sky. Besides the previously mentioned symbols, it bore a prominent 1 on the fuselage, proclaiming his undisputed leadership in the squadron, adding another dimension to his reputation as a distinguished pilot. These details made him so identifiable that his enemies often avoided combat, which led Hartmann to remove these distinctions to blend in with the rest. Young, strong, and tireless, the pilot flew around 400 missions and engaged in combat more than 800 times before the end of the war. He was never wounded. He was one of the most active German pilots. However, his victories stemmed from more than just repeated exposure to combat. His approach to gunnery was different from that of other Luftwaffe marksmen. Hartmann himself absolutely denied being a good long-range shooter, which he considered risky. His infallible system consisted of 4 steps: see, decide, attack, break contact. At least 8 out of the 16 times he was forced to land were due to his plane colliding with debris from the Russian aircraft he had destroyed at close range. Despite this danger, he emerged from the war unscathed. On August 19, 1943, Hartmann's squadron was ordered to support a counterattack with Ju-87s, or Stukas, led by Hans Ulrich Rudel. During the battle, the young pilot downed 2 enemy aircraft, but pieces of the fuselage from one of his victims struck his plane, forcing him to make an emergency landing in hostile territory. Seeing Soviet soldiers approaching to capture him, Hartmann pretended to have suffered internal injuries. The Russian soldiers placed him on a stretcher and loaded him onto a truck for transport. However, the Soviet column was attacked by Rudel's Stukas, and in the confusion, the pilot jumped from the back of the truck and hid in a field of sunflowers, managing to evade his pursuers. He hid until dusk and then made his way back to the German lines. Upon reaching a German sentry post, one of the soldiers fired at him, but the bullet passed through his trousers without injuring him. 1 year later, in March 1944, and in one of those almost suicidal missions we mentioned before, the Black Devil managed to increase his tally of victories to 172. This earned him the personal distinction of Adolf Hitler, who awarded him the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross.
Der junge Offizier hält zum ersten Male die höchste deutsche Kriegsauszeichnung in den Händen.
But Hartmann continued to surprise with his skill slicing through the skies. In June of that same year, after shooting down 2 P-51s, his patrol was attacked by 8 American fighters. Hartmann recounts that during the battle, he had a P-51 lined up in his sights, but when he squeezed the trigger, he only heard that he had run out of ammunition. To worsen the situation, his plane ran out of fuel and he was forced to bail out with a parachute. As he floated slowly to the ground, American planes circled around him, and one appeared to be lining up to shoot him, which naturally terrified Hartmann. However, the pilot simply flew past him, waving with his hand. At the end of the war in May 1945, Hartmann made a bold and defiant decision. He refused to obey the order to fly to the British sector and abandon his men to avoid capture by the Soviets. Instead, he chose to stay with his team and achieved a significant milestone by shooting down his final enemy aircraft, number 352, a Russian Yakovlev Yak-9 fighter. Despite his young age, he displayed impressive courage by ordering the destruction of the 25 aircraft of his squadron, the legendary JG-52, thereby ending the most successful unit in military aviation history. After this feat, Hartmann surrendered to American forces. However, under the terms of the Yalta agreements, he was handed over to the Russians. The Yalta Conference, held in Ukraine from February 4 to 11, 1945, was a crucial event where leaders like Joseph Stalin, Winston Churchill, and Franklin D. Roosevelt discussed the future of Europe after the war. Stalin insisted that all Soviet prisoners of war be handed over, even if they were liberated by the Western Allies, and that captured Germans in the East be offered to the Soviets. It was due to this political decision that Hartmann and members of his team, including another celebrated fighter pilot, Hermann Graf, were handed over to a unit of the Red Army and imprisoned in a gulag in cold Siberia. Life in the gulags was extremely harsh and strict. They were a network of labor camps and prisons in the Soviet Union, primarily used during Joseph Stalin's regime from the 1930s to the 1950s. Unlike Nazi extermination camps, mass killing of prisoners did not occur there, but the inhumane conditions often led to high mortality rates. Food was scarce and of poor quality, and prisoners were subjected to very strict regulations. According to Soviet archives, by October 1945, there were still 687,300 Germans surviving in the gulags, with another 316,600 ethnic Germans serving as slave laborers. Among these prisoners, Erich Hartmann was considered a valuable, high-profile figure. His fame as an aviator preceded him. It was no small matter that both Hartmann and Graf were two of only 27 Germans awarded the diamonds to the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross. And the Soviets were fully aware of who they were. Both had been favored by Adolf Hitler, receiving considerable media attention. The Soviets even knew the pilot by name and his battle call sign, the Black Devil. After being captured, the Soviets tried to persuade Hartmann to betray Germany. When he adamantly refused, he was brought to trial. Of his 352 victories, the Soviets themselves confirmed at least 325 and accused him of war crimes, classifying him as a common prisoner without international protections. Although Stalin allowed the Soviet Union to remain a signatory to the Hague Conventions, they never signed the 1929 Geneva Convention, which prevented inspections by the International Committee of the Red Cross in the camps. As a result, working conditions and the health of prisoners were not monitored. The Germans endured long and grueling days, receiving barely enough food and lacking access to medical or dental care. Hartmann, sentenced to 25 years of forced labor, passed through several gulags, from the coal mine in SH0T to Novocherkassk, and finally Perko in the Ural Mountains. From the depths of the mines, the Black Devil was far removed from piloting an aircraft as before. Despite the torture, unsanitary conditions, and cruel treatment, Hartmann managed to survive. Interestingly, Stalin issued special orders to protect him, though he was unaware of this. During numerous interviews, some more painful than others, the talented pilot shared his reflections. On one occasion he said, "I still don't understand what they expected to get from me. Perhaps it was mere curiosity. I had encounters with Hitler on more than one occasion. As a diamond holder, equivalent to a 3-time hero of the Soviet Union, they saw me as an exotic animal in a zoo." The SH0T Gulag was notorious for its unparalleled horror. Hundreds of men perished monthly, especially during relentless winters. In addition to deaths, the mine suffered collapses and toxic gas emissions, with no precautions taken to safeguard the structure or protect the workers. Due to his immense reputation as a national hero, Hartmann gained significant influence among the other prisoners at SH0T, leading him to lead a hunger strike in protest against the abuses. Guards reacted by beating him and exposing him to the cold. Later, following directives from Moscow, they force-fed him for 27 consecutive days to preserve his life. The Russians were aware that the prodigious pilot was a valuable prisoner, for whom they could potentially seek rewards or political exchanges in the future. Thus, keeping him safe and sound became a matter of national importance for Stalin's regime. While in prison, Hartmann received the sad news of his son Peter's death from pneumonia shortly after the end of the war. However, he was fortunate that his wife Ursula remained by his side and had the privilege of reading some of the more than 400 letters she sent him during his 10.5 years of captivity. The only connection to the world outside the Gulag walls. On the other hand, Hermann Graf eventually yielded and signed documents against his own country, resulting in his release on December 25, 1949, though he was labeled as mentally deficient. Hartmann could have followed his footsteps if he had accepted to sign confessions of treason, but he remained steadfast in his refusal and did not return home until October 1955. Despite being offered the possibility to return if he agreed to work as a spy for the new KGB, the Russian intelligence service, he once again rejected the offer. After spending a decade in a gulag, accused by the USSR of causing the deaths of 780 civilians in Bryansk, a city located 380 kilometers from Moscow, and destroying over 350 Soviet aircraft, Hartmann was finally released. Upon returning to West Germany, he assumed leadership of the first post-war jet fighter unit. This appointment not only marked a triumphant return for him, but also demonstrated confidence in his ability and leadership at a crucial time for the modernization of German aviation. During his tenure, he significantly contributed to the development of the West German Air Force, using his knowledge and experience to strengthen the country's air power. His leadership left an indelible mark on the history of German military aviation, solidifying his legacy as one of the most outstanding pilots of his time. Although he retired from military life in 1970, his influence endured far beyond his active service. Before his death at the age of 71 in 1993, Hartmann agreed to grant an interview in which he openly discussed controversial aspects of his past in service to Hitler, topics he had avoided addressing since the end of World War II. When asked if he felt hatred towards the Russians after spending 10 years in Soviet prisons, the pilot responded, "A lesson I have learned is this: Never hate an entire people for the wicked actions of some of its members. Hatred and intolerance destroyed my nation, and millions died. I hope most people do not hate Germans because of the Nazis, or Americans because of slavery. Never hate. Hatred consumes you alive. Throughout his many missions, the Black Devil always sought to proudly fly Germany's flag high. His name continues to resonate in the ears of new aviators who aspire to follow in his footsteps. Because Erich Hartmann's story was not in vain, his life oscillated between the sky and the earth. That concludes the report. We invite you to share this video so that more people can discover firsthand the fascinating story of Erich Hartmann, the distinguished World War II fighter pilot. Thank you for your interest and for joining us in this installment of military history.